Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to go over 20 life lessons that I learned in 2020. Let's get started. The first one is from a blog post by Paul Graham called The Top of My To-Do List. And it comes from a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the list of top 5 regrets is in no particular order. Number 1, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 2, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Number 3, I wish I'd let myself be happier. Number 4, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. And number 5, I wish I'd kept in touch with my friends. So given that we know that these are the top 5 regrets that people have when they're on their deathbed, these are all mistakes that it's very easy for us to fall into by default. And as Paul Graham says in the blog post, the ideal way for us to avoid those would be to change our defaults. But in the absence of completely changing our lives around, there is an easy way that we can remind ourselves of those. And so what Paul does, which I've now started to do, is write these 5 commandments at the top of my to-do list. Don't ignore your dreams, don't work too much, say what you think, cultivate friendships, and be happy. So that is now at the top of my to-do list, and whether I'm doing a to-do list in Notion or in Rome or in real life, I always try and remind myself to have those 5 things at the top. Secondly, I've really learned this year that for me, if I want to grow as a person, I need to lean into doing the things I'm scared of, or lean into the fear. So for example, earlier this year, a publisher approached me and said, would you be interested in writing a book? And we had a few chats, and this seemed like a very, very, very scary thing. And I was on the verge of saying, no, I don't feel qualified, or no, I'm not good enough to write a book about whatever. And then I had this feeling of fear, and I really analyzed it. And I had all these excuses in my head of, various imposter syndrome, and I'm not qualified to write a book, and who wants to hear from me anyway, and all of these things. And what I summed it down to was I was just really scared. I did not if I were to write a book, I didn't want it to be bad. I didn't want it to get negative reviews. I was scared. And as soon as I named that feeling of fear, I knew that I had to say yes and do this thing, because leaning into the fear is how we grow as people. And usually for me, I found that if I'm scared of doing something, provided that something is not physically putting my life in danger, if I'm scared of doing something, that is a very strong indicator that I should be doing the thing. So moving forward, I may be writing a book, and I will tell you more about that later. If you want to find out more about that, then sign up to my email list, link in the video description, and you will get lots more details about that as and when they are ready. Thirdly, I was reminded of a lesson that I first learned in 2019, which is the difference between have to and get to. And this is just a mental mindset shift that completely changes the game, for me at least, when it comes to thinking about how I have to do stuff. And I remember there was one real moment when I was at work and I was on an evening shift, and it was just approaching the end of my shift, and one of the nurses came up to me and said, this patient needs a cannula. So, intravenous access to put drugs in. And I had this sense of, why do I have to do this? And I was like, okay, so I kind of dragged myself up and I got all the stuff together. And then I realized that I was feeling a bit disgruntled about doing this cannula, because I was thinking about it that I have to do this. And I remembered a blog post that Seth Godin wrote that I read in 2019, which talked about reframing things from have to get to. So it's not I have to do this cannula, it's I get to do this cannula. And just that mindset shift, just changing the framing of it in my head, made me realize how appreciative and grateful I was to be in that position where I had the privilege and the honor of putting a needle in someone and hopefully doing it in a nice way and talking to them and easing them through this process. And instead of thinking I have to do this just before my shift ends, I thought of it as, I get to do this and this is awesome. And it was just that thing, just that little change that completely changed the way I approached that situation, and I hope led to a better experience for the patient overall. And now when I find myself being procrastinating from something or thinking, that feeling of, I don't want to do this, I switch from I have to do this to I get to do this, and that always helps me. Number 4 is a very simple one, which is that I really struggle with waking up in the mornings. I have my phone across the bedroom from me, so I have to switch off the alarm. I recently realized that I could just ask Siri to switch the alarm off, so I don't even have to get out of bed. And so one mental hack that I found to help myself actually get out of bed is to tell myself that it's okay to get back into bed and I'm allowed to sleep, but I have to have a shower first. And inevitably, when I have a shower and sing a few songs in the shower and stuff, I feel fully awake and energized and revitalized, and I don't actually want to go back into bed. But telling myself that I'm allowed to go back into bed only once I've had a shower helps me kind of trick my brain into letting me get out of bed. So I thought that was an idea worth sharing. Lesson number 5 is that I realized this year, particularly, that my information diet is not very good. So by information diet, I mean the books I read and the podcasts I listen to and the audiobooks I listen to. Because, I was looking through my list of podcasts that I'm subscribed to, and of the 69 of them, 65 of them were something to do with business or tech or entrepreneurship or like creator type stuff. Only one of them was related to health, and only one of them out of the list of 69 was related to relationships. And given that the most important things in life are health and relationships above things like business, entrepreneurship, tech, creativity, like all of this sort of stuff, that really made me realize that, wow, I'm really not putting the focus and effort into improving my health and improving my relationships that I really should be doing. Because what is the point of listening to 65 business podcasts when I still eat like unhealthy takeaways every day? And actually, we've just ordered some fried chicken for the evening. What's the point of listening to 65 business podcasts about how to make my business grow if I'm not putting even a modicum of effort into my personal relationships, which are really the thing that is going to lead to long-lasting happiness? And so now what I'm trying to do is reshape my information diet so that it reflects more of what my priorities in life actually are, or what my priorities in life I would like to be. Like, I would like to focus more on health and relationships rather than business. And so I'm trying to shape the diet around that. And actually, there's a great quote that I wrote about in my email newsletter where I share these things on a weekly basis. Link in the video description, check it out. The quote was, "The healthy person has 1,000 wishes. The sick person has only one." Number 6, I've started thinking a lot about the components of an ideal life. And I hadn't really come across this sort of framing before until I listened to a podcast. I think it was the Samantha Ryan show where Naval Ravikant was being interviewed. And she asked him, what are the components of an ideal life? And he said that, well, most people would say that there's 4 things in an ideal life. Number 1, physical health. Number 2, mental health / happiness / mental well-being, that sort of stuff. Number 3, relationships. And number 4, money / work / putting a roof above your head, that sort of stuff. And so I reflected on these a little bit. And again, I realized that I was just like always so focused on the kind of money, career, financial independence, freedom, that side of things, and kind of neglecting the physical health, the mental health, well-being, happiness type stuff, and also the relationship type stuff. So hearing it framed in that way has kind of made me appreciate that, okay, these are the 4 important things in life. And at the moment, I skew way too much towards one of them, and I need to be giving more effort to the other 3. So that's what I'm going to be doing, hopefully, from the new year onwards. And actually, there's a second quote from this episode, which is, "The ideal life would be one where you had a hobby that as a byproduct made you money, you had a hobby that as a byproduct kept you healthy, and you had a hobby that as a byproduct made you smarter and more creative." And that's like another way of thinking about, what would a good life be? So what is it for me? So I've got a hobby that as a byproduct makes me money. So that would be this YouTube channel. To an extent, I think it also makes me smarter and more creative. And a hobby that as a byproduct keeps you healthy. So for me, sort of that's going to the gym, but actually a lot more for me, it's playing racket sports like tennis and badminton and squash. And actually now I'm starting to take those more seriously, playing tennis and badminton more regularly with friends. And I'm going to be starting tennis lessons as well. And I think if you can have those hobbies that fulfill these different criteria, that is another way to an ideal life, as Naval would say. Next, I want to talk about the idea of accountability. Now, this is something that I really hadn't appreciated before this year. And what really sealed the deal for me was in the first lockdown in March of 2020, I decided, hey, it's my dream to become a Gymshark athlete, and now I can't go to the gym, so why don't I do some home workouts? And I kind of did it once or twice, and then I just kind of fell by the wayside. And then I was doing a podcast interview with a guy called Yusuf, who runs a podcast called Propane Fitness. And we were talking about like physical health goals. And he clearly knew a lot about physical health. So I said, hey, can you be my trainer? And he said, yeah, sure. I'll happily do some online sessions with you. And it turned out that all this thing was just a little bit of accountability. He just created a Google Sheet for me and later put it into Notion. That was a workout plan. And he told me what macros I needed to hit. And I was just meant to track them on MyFitnessPal and send him a screenshot every week. And just that little thing, having someone to hold me accountable, even though this person wasn't anywhere near me, he was living in like Manchester up north or something, having someone to hold me accountable made me really make progress on the home workout front and also on the healthy eating front at the time. And since realizing the huge power of this accountability stuff, I've now been looking to hire coaches to work with me on all sorts of different domains, because I realized that in the past, I used to think of it like, hey, I want to learn this thing, or I want to get better at this thing. Therefore, I need to figure it out by myself. And that was totally okay when I had tons and tons of time on my hand and no money. But now that I have, that I feel I have less time on my hands and more money, thanks to this YouTube channel, amongst other things, it's now a total no-brainer to For example, take tennis lessons or piano lessons or guitar lessons or singing lessons. And I've started doing all of these things recently. And most of that, to be honest, is related to the power of accountability. Next, we have the life lesson, do what you're doing. Now, this comes from a very good blog called Raptitude, where the author, David, references a book from the 1990s about spring cleaning. You know, spring cleaning is in cleaning your house very thoroughly. And this book from the 90s about spring cleaning says, pay attention. Almost everything else will fall into place if you do. Don't think about revisions in the tax code or anything else. In Latin, age quod agis, do what you're doing. And, you know, this is fantastic life advice from this book about spring cleaning a house. Because in this book about spring cleaning, they say that, look, when you are cleaning the sink, you are fully focused on this thing of cleaning the sink. When you're scrubbing the doors, you are fully focused on scrubbing the doors. And that makes the art of spring cleaning a joy rather than a chore. And I think we can really apply this to everything that we're doing. And for me, I often find that if I'm, for example, eating food, I actually won't pay attention to the thing that I'm eating because I'll be, I don't know, listening to an audiobook or watching TV or just thinking about something completely random. And then before I know it, the meal's over and I'm like, well, I didn't really taste any of that. And so now whenever I'm doing something and I find my mind wandering, I try and remind myself that no, do what you're doing, keep your attention focused and being present in this moment where you're actually doing the thing rather than multitasking and thinking about a dozen different things while washing dishes or doing the ironing, for example. Next, we have the idea of improvisational productivity. Now, I heard about this on an episode of the My First Million podcast, where they were discussing / interviewing an investor called Daniel Gross. So what is improvisational productivity? So if I quote from Daniel's blog post, he says, "The longer you think about a task without doing it, the less novel it becomes to do. Writing things in your to-do list and coming back to them later helps you focus, but it comes at a cost. You've now converted an interesting idea into work. Since you've thought about it a little bit, it's less interesting to work on." And I've definitely found this as well for projects that I've been working on. Like, I think sometime last year, I started a second YouTube channel called Appendix, which was gonna house lots of medical education related things. And I'd been toying with that idea for a whole year, and I'd been making all these plans, but you know, after getting excited about it and making all the plans, I then didn't bother working on it because I'd already done the fun bit of thinking about it and planning, and that was kind of cool. And then just executing on it just felt like work, and so I didn't do it. Equally, anytime I make a new Skillshare class, the longer I think about it and the longer we spend planning it, the less likely it is to get done because now all the fun stuff is done and it's only the work that's remaining. And so what I try to do now is when I have an idea for something, I will do what I can to try and actually start executing on it straight away. And I think there's a real value in minimizing the time between thinking of something and then executing on it. Like, obviously planning is useful to an extent, but as Daniel says in his blog post, you know, it's all about improvisational productivity. We actually become less productive when we spend a lot of time planning because the stuff just seems a lot less interesting to us. Next, we have an idea called homework for life. And I came across this in a book called Storyworthy by a chap called Matthew Dix. And this guy is like an expert storyteller and is really good at telling stories. And storytelling is something that I really want to improve about myself. So I read this book in an attempt to hopefully improve my own storytelling and to make my YouTube videos a little bit better. And the idea behind homework for life is that it's an exercise that we do every single night before we go to bed, and it's our homework for life, so we do it for the rest of our life. And the exercise is simple. We just want to ask ourselves the question of, what is the most story-worthy moment of my day? Like, if I had to tell a story about something that happened today, what would I tell a story about? And the idea is that we make a table or a spreadsheet, or I do this in Notion, obviously, where we write down the date and then write down our story-worthy moment. Now, this has a few different benefits. Firstly, it just helps us remember more of life. Like, you know, I did this homework for life thing for a period of a few months, and then I completely forgot about it. And now when I look back at my list, I can quite vividly remember each day where I've written a story-worthy entry. I'm like, oh, that was the day where that thing happened at work, or that was the day where this person came over for dinner. Whereas if I imagine the rest of the time, you know, the few months where I wasn't doing this religiously every night, those days have sort of blended into each other. And especially with the whole lockdown thing, especially with sort of every day feeling very similar to the last, I have found that I remember a lot less of the things in my life. And therefore, in a way, time has been moving faster for me. Whereas when I do my homework for life, time moves slower, because my perception of time slows down because now I'm remembering more things about my day. So that's one benefit from homework for life, that it just helps you remember your days a little bit better. But the second benefit is that when it comes to storytelling, we all, and I'm definitely guilty of this, we all feel that our lives are boring and we have nothing to tell, and oh, I haven't been on holiday anywhere interesting today, or I haven't done anything particularly wild. But there's a really nice thing that Matthew says in the book. He says that no one wants to hear your drinking stories and no one wants to hear about your travel stories. Those are two categories of stories that just like throw away completely. And that made me feel really good because I'm like, I don't have any drinking stories and I don't have many travel stories. And yet when I think of tell a story, that those two are the first things I come to, that whenever I hear people tell a story, it's always either about drinking or about travel. And so if we do this homework for life thing, we have to pick out a story-worthy moment of our day that if we had to, we could tell a story out of. It forces us to think of our lives as being more interesting than they actually are, but also to find the actual story moments within our lives, because most story-worthy moments actually come from failure and transformation rather than, oh my God, I had a great time on holiday. You wouldn't believe all the different places we went to. So this is something I'm trying to get myself to do more of. I have an iPad Air on my bedside table where I write down my homework for life in Notion every evening. Sometimes I remember to do this, sometimes I forget. I'm trying to build more ways into my routine where I can systemize this thing so that I will always remember to do homework for life every single day. Next is something that I only discovered earlier this year, and that is the incredible power of listening to audiobooks at like speed multiples, so like 2x or 1.5x or 2.5x speed. And I've been listening to audiobooks on Audible since like 2017. When I first discovered the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. And at the time, I tried to listen at 2x speed and I thought, oh, okay, no, this is way too fast. I can't be dealing with this. I actually want to savor it. I want to listen to it at 1x speed. And then I kept on listening to these really long fantasy audiobook series. For example, this year I finished the Wheel of Time series, which is 14 books. And I've been listening to it since March of 2019. So it took me a whole 12 months plus to finish the Wheel of Time series. But this year I realized that actually, especially for the slower bits of these books, if I just speed it up to 1.5 or even 2x speed, or even sometimes higher than that, I personally don't lose any extra enjoyment from it going fast. In fact, in a way, I gain more enjoyment because it's faster and therefore there's more exciting stuff happening. So now, at the moment, I'm listening to Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which just came out 2 weeks ago. And I'm listening to that at 1.5x speed because I want to savor it. And maybe when it gets to the really, really epic bits, I'll slow it down to 1x speed. But it's just something that I hadn't really appreciated before this year. And thanks to listening to stuff at 2x speed or 3x speed or whatever, I've now gotten through a lot more books. And this is useful because it helps me read more, which I always like. But it's also useful because it reduces the time cost for any book that someone recommends to me. A few months ago, I remember someone recommended Bob Iger's autobiography, The Ride of a Lifetime. He was the CEO of the Walt Disney Company for 15 years. And I saw it was an Audible and I saw it was an 8-hour audiobook. And so if I listened at 2x speed, it would become a 4-hour audiobook. And so over the course of just 2 days driving to and from work, I listened to the whole audiobook in just 4 hours. And it was a really good book. And I would not have read it or listened to it had I not had that speed multiple, because it would have just felt like too much of do I really have 8 hours to listen to this? Whereas 4 hours is of course I have 4 hours to listen to this. So 2 main benefits of listening to audiobooks at speed multiples. Next, we have an exercise called the Odyssey plan. And I came across this in an Unjaded Jade video, I think in December of 2019. And I did the exercise round about this time last year. Now, the Odyssey plan is an exercise that apparently they get Stanford Business School students to go through. And it's in 3 parts. The first part is write out in detail what your life will look like 5 years from now if you go down your current path. So you write that out in lots of detail, what does life look like if you continue doing what you're doing? Number 2, what does life look like in 5 years' time if you take a completely different path? And number 3, what does life look like 5 years from now if you take a path where money and societal obligations are not a factor that you have to consider? And so when I did the Odyssey plan in this time last year, it made me realize that the path that I was taking, which was, doing medical training in the UK and living in Cambridge all my life and maybe becoming a supervisor at a college and doing medical education, that was the path that I was kind of on. And I sort of realized that actually this is maybe not where I actually want to be 5 years from now, because it felt too easy. It felt like, okay, there's no real challenge along here. I know that I can make this happen. And it just kind of lost all the excitement for me. And when I thought about all the other things I could be doing, this Odyssey plan exercise was partly what prompted me to take a year out of medicine to theoretically travel the world before the world ended. And now I'm going to take a further year out of full-time medical training so that I can travel more, hopefully when the coronavirus situation gets less bad. Because I just think that in 5 years from now, I would have much rather that I spent 2 years maybe doing this YouTube thing or traveling the world or maybe working in Australia for a bit or doing stuff like that rather than you know, 5 years from now, I'm going to work every day. I'm doing the same thing I've always done. And I'm just climbing up essentially the medicine corporate ladder while staying in my comfort zone. So really useful exercise. I will be forever grateful to Jade for showing me this in her video where she talks about how to figure out what to do with your life. But it's something I think about a lot. Like, well, what is my life going to look like in 5 years down this current path? And is this something that I want to change? This year, I really appreciated the power of clarity. What does clarity mean? Clarity is one of the 5 steps of David Allen's approach called getting things done, which is like the Bible about productivity. And the 5 steps of that are capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. The clarify bit is the really important thing, because when it comes to, for example, a to-do list, a big part of why we procrastinate from doing things is because the thing we have to do is just not clear enough in our heads. If I were to write life lessons video, it's a very nebulous thing. If, however, I had on my to-do list that film 15 life lessons video or write the script for the 20 life lessons video, that's more specific. I've got more clarity on what the thing actually is. If I wrote on my to-do list chemistry revision, it's never going to get done because, like, what the hell does chemistry revision mean? Whereas if I wrote on my to-do list, revise chapter 1, module 4 within physiology about heart and membranes and stuff, then I'll be like, okay, cool. That's a more specific thing. I've got clarity on it. And it feels like less of a mental when it comes to actually doing the thing. So now whenever I go through my to-do list, I always think, okay, have I really clarified every single item on here? And is it really obvious to me what I actually have to do for this? And I've seen this pattern with basically all of my friends who struggle with procrastination. Is that, okay, what are you supposed to be doing? Oh, like some prep for my exam. Okay, I mean, what does that look like? Like, what specifically are you going to be doing? And the more specific you can get about the items on your to-do list, the less likely you are to procrastinate. At least that's what I found for me. Next, I found it really helpful to move away from thinking of time in 1 hour chunks and instead to think of time in 15-minute chunks. So just like by default in my head, I think of time in 1 hour, sort of 1 hour sort of increments. And so if it's like 10:37 or something, and then I think, oh, well, you know what? 11 o'clock is a reasonable time. I'm just going to start work at 11 o'clock. And then I will procrastinate for those 23 minutes and start work at 11. Or if I'm arranging a phone call with someone, just by default, the way calendars operate, like Google Calendar, it just kind of default does it for an hour. And so I'll have phone call from like with like my friend from like 12 to 1. And if it finishes at like 12:23, I'll like, oh, okay, well, it finishes at 1, and then I'll start the next thing at 1 o'clock. And I realized that if I just think of time in 15-minute chunks instead, it means I end up wasting a lot less time, because now if it's 10:37, then I only have 8 minutes to wait until 10:45, and then I can do the thing I actually wanted to do at 10:45 rather than procrastinating an extra 15 minutes and waiting to do it at 11. And so now when I'm scheduling meetings and stuff, I do try and think of it in terms of 15-minute increments rather than in 1 hour increments. And I found that this has actually given me a lot more time in my life this year. Next, let's talk about the idea of goals. Now, before this year, I used to be very anti-goal setting, because I used to think that, okay, what's the point of setting a goal? Like, the only point of setting a goal is like, it feels a bit pointless. Like if I have hey, I want to hit 2 million subscribers by the end of the year or whatever, that feels like a very pointless goal, because if I hit it, then, you know, I'll get a nice feeling for 2 seconds and then the goalpost will shift. And if I don't hit it, then I'll be disappointed because I didn't hit my goal. And the other reason that I was anti-goals is because I felt that the thing that we should be trying to cultivate is self-acceptance in our lives. At least for me, that, you know, it feels like a more worthwhile aim to try to be satisfied with what I have rather than to continuously strive for more. But this year, especially through all the deep dives that I've been doing, where I interview people and we have an extended conversation, I've asked almost everyone about how they think about goals. And one thing I've learned is that it's actually completely okay to have this tension between self-acceptance and self-improvement. And it's like, yes, on the one hand, we can learn to accept ourselves for who we are. But on the other hand, we can also strive to improve who we are and do more interesting things. And I don't know, strive to do challenging things and have these stretch goals and stuff. And I used to try and find like, oh, there's got to be a way to reconcile these two things. There's got to be a way to reconcile self-acceptance versus self-improvement. But then, I don't know who it was. I feel like it was maybe a guy called Ben Hardy, who I did a deep dive with, who said that, you know, you actually don't need to reconcile it. You can accept that, yes, part of me is focusing on self-acceptance, but another part of me is focusing on self-improvement. That is how I think about goals. Like, I'm okay with now setting goals, but I'm not making my own personal, like, personal fulfillment be reliant on that goal being fulfilled. At this point, we've gone over 15 life lessons. The other 5 live lessons are actually in the extended version of this video, which you'll find on Nebula. If you haven't heard, Nebula is an independent streaming platform that's run by me and a bunch of other creators. And on Nebula, we post extended versions of YouTube videos, ad-free versions of YouTube videos, and a lot of other exclusive content that you won't find on YouTube. It's not supposed to be a competitor to YouTube, because who can compete with YouTube? It's just supposed to be like an extra place we can put stuff without having to worry about the YouTube algorithm. And so on Nebula, I've got lots of other exclusive things. So for example, I've got my workflow series, which does a deep dive into my productivity workflows for using different apps. I have my deep dive snippet series, which takes kind of bite-sized snippets from all of the interviews that I do with people across the internet and turns them into bite-sized chunks that you can consume. And there are also ad-free versions of all my videos, which you get early access to, and also extended versions of videos like this one, which has 5 more life lessons. So if you've got a subscription to Nebula, you can watch this video over there. If you haven't, the best way to sign up for Nebula is to actually sign up to CuriosityStream, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Now, CuriosityStream is the world's leading documentary streaming subscription platform, founded by John Hendricks, the founder of the Discovery Channel. And on CuriosityStream, they've got hundreds of amazing high-quality documentaries across science, technology, animals, health, nature, all sorts of interesting things. And one that I've been enjoying particularly is called Redesign My Brain, where the documentary maker guy goes around exploring all of the different ways that we can supercharge our own attention and creativity and like processing power of our brains. Now, because CuriosityStream love independent educational creators, they've actually partnered up with us on Nebula. And so if you sign up to an annual CuriosityStream subscription, which at the moment is 41% off for the holidays and therefore is under $13 a year, for less than $13 a year, you get CuriosityStream, and you also get free access to Nebula bundled with that. And that makes this the single best deal in the streaming world, in my opinion. So if you want to see the extended version of this video, on top of lots of exclusive content from me and a bunch of other creator friends like Thomas Frank and Legal Eagle and Tom Scott and Lindsay Ellis, head over to curiositystream.com/Ali, and then your Nebula details will be emailed to you. So thank you, CuriosityStream, for sponsoring this video. If you like this video, then click over here to get my life lessons video that I made this time last year, and that is 15 life lessons, a lot of life lessons that I learned in 2019. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.